Greetings and welcome back to the podcast. This episode, we are joined by Mr. Curtis Stange, CEO of ATB Financial, a Crown-owned financial institution based in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, with approximately 5,300 team members, 825,000 clients, and a balance sheet of $62 billion. Mr. Stange was appointed President and CEO of ATB Financial in June of 2018 and has more than 35 years of experience in financial services in Canada. Prior to becoming CEO, Mr. Stange held a number of senior leadership roles at ATB Financial, as well as one of Canada's Big Five banks, gaining experience in retail, wealth management, and commercial banking throughout British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. Mr. Stange is a Stanford alumni, member of the Alberta Business Council, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce Western Executive Council, chairs the ATB Subsidiary Board, serves on advisory boards for the Edmonton International Airport, Visa Canada, Access Connects, Advancing Women Executives in Western Canada, and also co-chairs the STARS Air Ambulance Board. Among other things, we discuss new opportunities in digital assets, 90 years of banking, and why ATB is committed to the energy sector. This podcast episode is powered by ATB Capital Markets. ATB Capital Markets provides financial solutions and strategic advisory services to help businesses thrive. With a track record of successful deal execution, ATB is a full-service investment dealer with a deep understanding and commitment to the industries it serves. Visit atbcapitalmarkets.com for more information. This episode is brought to you by Upgrade Labs. Upgrade Labs offers a comprehensive range of cutting-edge performance and recovery services that have been proven to optimize your health in minutes, not hours. Whether it's accelerating muscle mass and bone density or addressing injury and inflammation, start your experience by booking a free cell health analysis at upgradelabs.com/Calgary. This podcast is brought to you by Energy United. Energy United is an organization with a mission to promote practical energy policy across Canada. Energy United is building a community of Canadians that are passionate about Canada's natural gas and oil industry and are willing to take action. Energy United is driving change on issues that matter, all the way from the carbon tax to the emissions cap. Join Energy United to make a difference at energyunited.ca. This podcast episode is brought to you by 8AM Solutions. 8AM Solutions is the modern Canadian-based software for vendor and contractor risk management in the energy sector. 8AM Solutions leverages industry-leading technology at affordable prices to simplify and de-risk your supply chain, ensuring your operations run smoothly and meet legislative due diligence requirements. Visit 8amsolutions.com to learn more. If you're ready, we can begin.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Curtis Stange. Thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Good morning, Trevor. Good to be here with you.
Before we start, I just have to give a quick thank you for sponsoring the podcast via ATB Capital Markets. And so I just want to say thanks. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Yeah, thanks. You're doing some great things. You've had some great guests on the air, and we're proud to support you and your podcast and talking about energy in Alberta and Canada more broadly. So it's great to be a sponsor.
Also, a quick shout out to Lori Dundas and Ruben Esterhuizen. I think I pronounced that wrong, but they're the ones who kind of organized this and connected us. So
that's great.
Just have to say a quick thank you to them. For the listener, you are the CEO of ATB, but what is ATB?
Yeah, ATB Financial, we're the only full-service bank remaining in Canada, which is interesting when you think about it with the recent announcement of National Bank buying CWB. And when I mean full service, I mean that we offer a full comprehensive suite of products for consumers and Albertans through a vast branch network. We offer wealth management, a broad value proposition in wealth management, which is national, by the way. Many people don't know, but we're national in the wealth space. And then we offer full vertical of business banking and including capital markets, and which our capital markets business, as people know, is in Canada and the US. So yeah, it's getting lonely as a regional bank in Canada, and the only bank headquartered in Western Canada, which we're very proud of.
If I'm correct, the bank was originally established in the 30s, 1938?
It was September 29th, 1938. Yeah, we like to say out of the ashes of the Great Depression, we were formed. And it's an interesting story there, and maybe we'll get into it a little bit. I was 23 years with CIBC before joining ATB 15 years ago now, and 7 years their CEO. But yeah, we were formed in 1938, and it was really an opportunity the province saw to stand up a bank that would offer growth capital lending for businesses and predominantly agriculture back then in the late 30s, as the big banks were moving their balance sheets and their lending practices more towards the growth area of central Canada. So there was a bit of a void and an opportunity. And, I think the vision of the province at the time was a good one. And you fast forward over these last 86 years to what we've become today is quite impressive.
Coming up on 100 years now.
Yeah, coming up on 100 years. Yeah, whether or not I'll be around at the 100th anniversary would be nice, but we'll see. Yeah, coming up on 100 years. It's great story.
To give the listeners perspective, how big is ATB in terms of the lending capacity, balance sheet? If I'm correct, it's the 8th largest lender in Canada?
Yeah, and that's 8th if you include Desjardins. If you exclude Desjardins, then we would be 7th. And there's a big gap between us and the big 6 for sure. But we advertise the 8th by asset size. That's sometimes how people define the size of banks. But we are about 5,300 team members, we refer to them as. We have about 825,000 clients. And we have a balance sheet that's right around 62 billion. Of which the balance sheet of 62 billion, about 53 billion would be in loans. Yeah.
The idea being to start the ATB was to help Alberta businesses get going, more or less. Long story short, in simple terms.
Yeah, get going and provide all sorts of growth capital and to expand and to start and to be prosperous. I think again, we still look at ourselves as a catalyst for growth in the province. This is it. Beyond the numbers of who we are and the people that define size of banks by assets and balance sheet size and number of employees, we really look at ourselves as that catalyst of growth. And how do we take our strategies and help incubate new businesses, help other businesses grow, expand, acquire other businesses? And again, that's in the province and beyond as you look at our capital markets business, which has really been growing quite rapidly as we've been investing in that quite predominantly over the last several years.
As a sponsor, like I said, ATB Capital Markets is doing their part when they sponsor the podcast. So.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, it's a great team there.
The idea to having a local bank, literally called the Alberta Treasuries Bank, was that you understood the local businesses better and could help them get financed. Do you need the local knowledge, I think?
Yeah, I think you do too. I think that's a good call out, Trevor. I think, Alberta Treasury Branches was the original name. And then, almost a decade ago now, we legally changed our name with the province to ATB Financial. But people, when I'm out and about and talking with clients and things like that, at times they'll refer to us as the old Treasury Branches for sure. So fondly, we're known as the Treasury Branches to some. But I think to your point, being located in the West, having our head office in Edmonton and a prominent across the province, this also enables us to deliver a pretty unique value proposition where we absolutely do know the markets, the economies, the consumers, the businesses in Alberta better than anybody else. And I think that allows us to put together our advisory offer that will differentiate the type of advice and the value proposition and products and services that we deliver to our clients, from consumer to wealth to business to capital markets, different and more effectively than anyone else. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to deliver a differentiated, consistently remarkable experience to our clients. And in some respects, and through the capital markets business, that means differentiated through the advice that we provide, which is something that we invest a lot of time and effort in. And proudly, I think being located in Western Canada, the energy hotbed of Alberta, it just allows us to do that more effectively than our competitors.
How did you get into banking and why?
Yeah, U of S grad, agriculture. I was a city kid that really took a liking to agriculture for a variety of reasons. So my studies early on were in agriculture at the U of S. And just as I was graduating, there was a career days at the U of S, and it was all the banks that were lined up, keen on ag students at that time. And, one thing led to another, and a bit of influence by my dad, I would say. There's no doubt, to get into banking. So I got into banking, and right out of university, spent 23 years with CIBC and had a really enjoyable career there. Started off in the prairies and moved into Alberta, into BC, and then back to Alberta, and then a big leap to move to Toronto. A lot of bankers have to go through Bay Street. So I spent 4 years in Toronto on Bay Street, and then 4 years in Ottawa, which was a great experience. And then in 2005 was asked to move back to Alberta. And then in 2009, I joined ATB Financial. So I'm a career banker now in 38 years in banking, and have enjoyed every moment of it. It's been incredibly humbling and yet exciting, and it's taken me to 4 provinces across the province, multiple cities. Our oldest son born in Regina, our youngest guy born in Kelowna. And yeah, we've got friends all over the country, and it's been just a real pleasure to be in the financial services industry.
Did you always want to be a banker, or were you just looking to get a job at the time?
Yeah, I would say no. Like, when I was in high school and going through university, did I see a path of getting into banking? Absolutely not. I think for me, the correlation between studying agriculture and getting into banking was, in my early days, that's where I focused. I focused on, I joined the company in this management training program, and was focused. They put me in rural Saskatchewan right away because of my connection to the ag industry and my studies and my love for that industry. And then when I got into banking, I really quickly understood the breadth of what banking and the opportunities they were. So yeah, no, did I think about graduating grade 12 and getting into banking after studying ag? No, I didn't. I love this industry for the breadth of opportunity and the complexity and the multiple plethora of opportunities that it offered me once I was in the door.
The economy is increasingly going digital. As the CEO of ATB, one of your main businesses is lending. How do you balance the traditional definitions of risk with hard assets and new opportunities in the digital space? How do you weigh those two sides of the lending? Do you think about that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, interesting question. I think just in the question there, if I can unpack and just clarify, to your point, many times people would look at banks as lenders. And that definitely is how we've been defined over the years. I think for us, we're trying to smash that model a little bit with the strategy that we're deploying around advice. And I think, in many cases, bankers would give advice around a debt instrument and the way that we provide capital, or we loan money, leverage our balance sheet for companies to grow. I think, that's changing in banking, and we're trying to change that landscape and the evolution of a piece of advice. And the piece of advice can be around a debt instrument, or it can be around another capital markets product or service. It can be risk mitigation in a financial markets instrument. It can be around expansion and growth capital through the capital market, or a debt instrument that helps, so I think I think it's important. And one of the messages I do want to get across is the evolution of banks, and looking at us and defining us at the size of our balance sheet, comparatively speaking, to the advice that we offer around a business and helping them enable them to do the things that they want to do. So I just wanted to call that out. But back to your question around digital assets, we are really good at financing hard physical assets. There's no doubt. In the 2000s, though, with the technology boom, we absolutely started to understand financing intellectual property. And we do that today. And now into digital assets, to your point, this is an evolution that banks are getting used to. They're not necessarily as touchable, if you will, as a hard physical asset that we can go out and we can count the cows, or we can go out and see the drilling rigs, or we can go and see the real estate. It's much different. And banks are evolving that way. So, the regulatory bodies are a little slow in moving. So banks are figuring out what it looks like for cryptocurrencies and where are the regulatory bodies versus how do we begin to understand what collateral looks like with digital assets. How do we secure the digital asset, which is increasingly important with cybercrime and the different evolution of this whole ecosystem. So, this is something, in my opinion, that banks are going to have to get better at, because these digital currencies and digital assets are not going away. They're only going to become more prominent. In fact, I think the number is now up to 10% of Canadians would have some type of crypto asset in a wallet, which is an interesting number. And so banks have to figure out how we secure them, how we collateralize them, how we work with regulatory bodies and understanding how you regulate them more effectively for transparency. And, we would be, as ATB Financial, on the forefront of some of those things. In our partnerships and relationships with fintechs, with cryptocurrency exchanges, we would be on the forefront of banks in Canada.
What would be an example of the digital assets that you may be leaning into more nowadays than you used to?
Yeah, I think when you look at the ecosystem of it, storing and securing them in some type of trust and some type of structure around what that looks like is an opportunity that not many, there's a few companies, there's a couple in Calgary here, in fact, but beyond banking a cryptocurrency company like an exchange, beyond understanding how you lend against that cryptocurrency for a consumer that's storing the value in a wallet, and how do we take possession of it, if you will, store it, secure it, and then lend against it, understanding the valuations based on the volatility. Beyond that, maybe there's an opportunity for us as an organization to get into what storing cryptocurrencies might look like technically in partnership with other companies, fintechs that do this quite well. And so, we are quite actively looking at the sort of the ecosystem of digital currencies and all the different players in it, and how do we participate? We've got some really knowledgeable people at ATB that are keenly pushing the company to move into this. And again, we're dipping our toe in the right way based on how fast regulatory bodies are moving and other aspects of the system itself.
Or if you start a popular website through ad revenue or even a podcast, you can generate legitimate revenue streams that traditionally maybe you wouldn't have got a loan in the past.
Yeah, that's right. Great idea. Maybe there's a partnership with you actually in the way.
I don't need any more debt. So.
No. Well, we can help with that too.
Maybe some advice.
Yeah. Right on.
The ATB is a crown corporation. To align the incentives of employees with the citizens of Alberta so that everyone feels the pain and the gain. How do you do that? How do you think about that with employees?
Yeah. That's, we are a crown corporation. We have a single owner, the province of Alberta, and we are passionately independent, which is really important. And there's a point in our history that if we decide to get into that in the podcast, I can share sort of the late 90s and how the pivot happened into a crown corporation. But we have a very independent board that I report into, our board chair, and obviously a management structure that would mimic publicly traded banks. And we hold ourselves accountable to OSFI standards, even though our regulator is ASFI, the Alberta Superintendent of Financial Institutions. And that includes capital regulation. We would have the strongest balance sheet of any regional bank in Canada. Our CFO says North America, but I say Canada. So we, again, even though we're a crown corporation, we, again, hold ourselves accountable to a level playing field with the competitors that would be publicly traded and other. But how do we balance the sort of the everyday Albertan, if you will, and our mandate? We talk about this an awful lot. First of all, we run the company. We have many, many stakeholders, like many organizations, but we run the company defining success against 4 stakeholder groups. One would be our team members. Culturally, we're one of the best places to work in Canada. In fact, we're the top bank, number 4 in the country across all companies, and the top bank. We hold our clients as a very important stakeholder. As I mentioned, we literally want to differentiate ourselves from our competitors by a differentiated experience that we deliver based on advice. And we have our shareholder as the third stakeholder. And we want to deliver returns that are equal to or greater than our peer group. And again, we've been working at over the past 6 or 7 years on strengthening our balance sheet. We just declared a dividend to the province of $100 million, first time ever in our history. And we've been able to do that because we have a very strong balance sheet, and balance sheets in banks are defined by common equity tier 1 capital, and regulatory minimums are around 7%. And we would track to about 12% of common equity tier 1. So that's really important for us. So having a really strong balance sheet and delivering a dividend while at the same time having the flexibility to grow. And the province expects us to grow and not only grow our balance sheet, but grow our income level so that the dividends can increase over time, which we absolutely plan on doing. The fourth stakeholder is the communities that we serve. And, to many Albertans, ATB's brand would be sort of inextricably linked with community giving. Our 5,000 team members volunteer tens of thousands of hours every single year. We donate directly in excess of $3 million a year, and we sponsor podcasts and events in the province equaling about another $6.5 or $7 million a year. So our brand and the connectedness that we have to the Albertan is, again, inextricably linked. And we do it across those 4 stakeholder groups. And those 4 stakeholder groups have to be in balance. You can't have a great culture in an organization that delivers a poor client experience and doesn't deliver to the bottom line for your shareholder, right? So we, at times in the company, we'll be focusing more so on one of those stakeholder groups, and they have to be in balance at the end of the day for us to be successful. And so we're committed to delivering across those 4 stakeholder groups in Alberta.
Also willing to do podcasts like this on the subject of accountability. Some large bank CEOs wouldn't take the time to do this. So it's there are clues.
Yeah, it's a great, I think for me, representing ATB, that is very transparent, very accessible.
Exactly.
And honestly, I've actually learned that through some really good leaders that I've had in my time, that transparency and accessibility are 2 things that consumers and businesses alike and team members value. So I do that. So it's my pleasure to do this podcast. On that note, I actually do a 30-minute call every Friday. I call it Friday and 30 with the entire company. We don't get the entire company that connects in on a Friday morning at 11:30 for 30 minutes, but we get usually between 1,500 and 2,000 team members. And I spend 15 minutes talking about what's current for me, what my week's been like, what I'm focused on, who I've talked to, and some current events if they're in the news. And then 15 minutes answering questions from team members that is on their minds for what they want to ask the CEO of the company that they're a part of. So it's just a testament to the team around me and our commitment to that transparent way of leadership.
Skin in the game via direct communication through podcasts like this.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I enjoy it.
What trends do you see ATB Financial focused on for growth in Alberta these days?
Yeah, so we've got a 10-year strategy that we created back in 2019 that we refer to as our path to 2030. And we're in, year 5 of execution against that strategy. And there's a variety of trends that we look for. It's a growth strategy. So again, as I mentioned, we want to grow balance sheet, grow income, grow client base. And we would look at a variety. There's a plethora of economic trends that we would look at, right from the basic of consumer price index to the price of oil, the price of gas, the price of commodities in the ag space. We look at technology and the evolution of technology and data and AI and how is that changing the landscape of banking. We look at regulatory bodies and how they're evolving and taking shape. And, I've been and blessed to be part of the banking industry in Canada for 38 years, and we're slow and we're not productive as some of our banks and other jurisdictions around the world. We're less innovative and we're higher cost, which is interesting from a banking perspective. But that maybe is another podcast for another time. But we look at regulatory bodies, we look at competitors, we look at changing consumer sentiment and behavior of businesses and what they need and what they expect. So there's a sort of a basket of 5 or 6 major trends that we look at that help formulate the strategies and any pivots or adjustments that we need to make. And that inform our tactics that are part of our strategies that we look at.
One of which is the reiterated commitment to the traditional Canadian energy industry.
Yeah, proudly.
So why did you make the decision to do that?
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Yeah, I think it's important to know that we've supported the energy industry in Alberta for decades, right? So this wasn't a new support. And it's an important time. Is if you look at some of the trends, much like we last talked about with respect to the evolution of technology, data, consumer sentiment, economics, like all these things play into making sure that we've got a really good, sound understanding of the industries that we support and where they're evolving to make sure that we can help enable them as a bank, right? As a financial services institution providing differentiated level of advice. And so the energy strategy was just that. It was a time for us to step back and say, boy, there's a shift taking place within this industry. And so why don't we take the time to sit back? And it took us probably 6 to 8 months to put together, which we think is a very strong strategy. And really what it does is essentially really have us anchor on and double down and recommit to an industry that we have been committed to for decades to say we know, or we would have a hypothesis about what this future of this industry is. And so for us as an organization, it was important to do that and to recommit what the value proposition as ATB Financial needed to be now and into the future to support the growth of this energy industry. So important for us as an organization and important for the province of Alberta, right? We know who our shareholder is. And so it was important to really have a good understanding of one of the primary industries in the province and us as the primary financial institution supporting it, that we had a strategy that, was more than just looking out the next 12 to 18 months. What does it look like to 2030? What does it look like to 2040 and potentially even into 2050? As you look at when peak oil, peak gas will happen and then, sort of reverse engineering what needs to be true as we look at the transition of that energy industry. So it was just important for us to anchor down on a strategy that defined the future and how we look at supporting the growth.
Sometimes as an entrepreneur, it can be difficult to get a loan to start your business. It can be even harder in the energy industry as an entrepreneur. How do you support the grassroots entrepreneurs in the traditional energy industry? Is it just by making capital available to them?
No more than that. I think that's an element of it. And, I think, again, over time, as an organization, we have fostered the incubation of the junior space in many cases. Were we perfect? No. Did we make some mistakes during that time period? Absolutely, we would have. And we think we're pretty darn good at identifying really strong management teams with really good assets that understand the evolution and where the industry is going and what the price points and what the economics need to be. And how do we provide advice in helping shape them, whether they're in rapid growth modes or they're in acquisition modes or divestiture modes, understanding the different sort of levels of producers in the industry has been really important for us. And I think important to know through the strategy, while we support all levels of organizations within the industry, it's important to know that I think our sweet spot is in that mid-cap space. And so our aspiration to be the leading mid-cap energy and advisory bank in North America is an aspiration and a goal that we've got clearly in our sights. And so I think, many organizations would align value propositions, products, services, core competencies, the offer that they have to differentiate them from their competitors. We think the mid-cap space is the space for us. And we have a very big junior book, and we participate in some of the more senior large cap deals through syndications and other partnerships. So, and I think it's important to know that we work through the entire ecosystem, from the explorers to the oil servicing companies to the transportation and storage, which I think is really important, to the renewable space through our project finance work, and a lot of the transitionary investment that's happening in carbon capture and other carbon reducing technologies and innovations that are taking place. So there's a whole ecosystem that we support with the value proposition and the people that we're deploying.
On one hand, ATB is a bank and you need to earn a profit, so you can't be throwing money away. But on the other hand, tomorrow's CNRL is today's bootstrap startup. So there's needs to be maybe a balance between supporting the up-and-comers.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think what we try and do, to your point, is there would be a risk profile of all sorts of different companies, depending on what product and proposition they have and the size they have. And so there's a cost of capital that gets applied to the risk profile of an organization. And it can be in the energy industry or agriculture industry or commercial real estate or transportation logistics. And what we try and do is apply, if it's our balance sheet, we're a senior debt offering with a certain risk profile when we're deploying our balance sheet, right? And so I think we do that better than most based on, as we've talked about, the understanding of Alberta industries and the economic volatility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if there's an opportunity for us to deploy other people's capital through capital markets, private equity issuings, different opportunities, we connect a buyer and a seller. And so I think, again, that's through the advisory offer that we offer. So again, it's not simply deploying our balance sheet. It could be connecting, sort of a higher profile organization with the right sort of type of capital that's meant for them based on, where they're at in their journey as an organization. So I think we do that extremely well.
The idea isn't to be dismissive of the younger entrepreneurs that may be the CEO of a large company one day, providing capital back to the province. You need to support the younger generation.
Completely. And there would be many stories that we would have in the energy industry and beyond that would help enable the growth. I mean, if I think of one, outside the energy industry, but I think of FYI Doctors. We met Al and his team when they were one location in Grand Prairie, Alberta. Now they have several hundred locations and would be extremely successful in how they've acquired and grown their business. There would be many examples where we would help incubate and grow smaller energy firms that have now grown into publicly traded, very successful organizations. Yeah.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Conate Water Solutions. Do you need cost-effective water sourcing options to supply your next drilling or completions program? Conate Water Solutions is a specialized hydrogeology company focused on water well drilling, testing, and water management services in Western Canada and Texas. Contact info@conatewater.com or check out conatewater.com for more details. Does ATB ever take the perspective of kind of a Y Combinator venture style?
Yes, we do. We do it within the financial services ecosystem. We would have some venture investments in fintechs. We have a couple of venture investments in fintechs. We invest in funds. So we would invest in AI funds. We would have partnership models where we would invest with private equity firms based here in Alberta that would be connected to the energy industry and some others that are not. But from a venture perspective, we stay close to the financial services industry because we know that industry very, very well. And we try and connect our investments into venture organizations or startups or fintechs that have a value proposition and can help enable us. Because that's, I think, part of banking into the future. And that's probably transferable into the energy industry as well, which is, this is a big ecosystem and partnerships will play a role. Collaboration will play a role as you bring your value proposition to life. So yes, we participate in some venture investments, and it's predominantly focused on the ecosystem of financial services and related to how we're trying to offer value to our client base.
One of the biggest or one of the growing revenue centers for ATB Financial is the capital markets side, if I'm correct. So from your perspective, what makes a good investment banker? Is it the guy who sleeps with the phone by his head at night or calls you 10 times before you answer? What do you look for in a capital markets leader?
We've got them. We have a plethora of them. So I'd welcome you to, for a day or two, come on and sit beside some of them and you'd actually be able to look them in the whites of their eyes. But I think generally speaking, knowledgeable, right? So they'd be knowledgeable in the industries that they're providing advice in. They'd be very curious. So I think part of differentiated advice begins with the types of questions that you ask. So curiosity and clarifying questions and passion around getting to really the essence of what the conversation is all about is really important. Relationship builder, there's no doubt about it. This is about relationships. I think finally, trusted advisors. When you look at an organization in the energy industry that's looking at expanding, that's looking at growth capital, that's looking at making an acquisition, that wants some research on the industry itself, that's looking at some liquidity through sales and trading activity, that's looking at risk mitigation strategies with financial products and derivatives and foreign exchange and hedging activities. You want the first call they make to be ATB Financial and a business banker, right? Like that's the aspiration. You want the corporations in the energy industry that are gathering around their boardrooms and talking about what the future will look like. You want them to say, we need the ATB capital markets banker at the boardroom table because of the value and the advice that they'll be able to provide into the conversation with the insights they have, with the tremendous amount of research that we have and the breadth of our value proposition and our knowledge of the industry. Like our energy team is, and I mean, I'm obviously very biased, but our energy team is ranked as one of the best in the country. Like, this is saying something. And again, I think for us, it is all about people. And even with the evolution of technology and the advancements of data, we fundamentally are anchored and grounded on empowering the human. So it's not about technology being the champion or data being the champion. The champion is the individual. And how do you empower that individual through the best evolution of investment in technology and data and AI insights and automation to enable the human to provide differentiated levels of advice, right? And so again, it's the barometer of success is, if you will, is being the first to call from those energy organizations that are looking at, key strategic decisions in their journey.
Some of the corporate finance relationships go back decades, so it can be a tough environment to crack some of the key relationships. But on the other hand, good management teams are always looking for the best advice possible, and perhaps it leaves a lot of opportunity for ATB going forward in the capital markets side.
Yeah, you earn your way in, one transaction at a time, one conversation at a time. It was partly the breadth of our value proposition as well. And I think I can connect the dots there with our investment in capital markets over the past 3, 4, 5 years. We had a very, very strong senior debt offering through our corporate banking offer, which included syndications, which included project finance and a financial markets group. Our clients were demanding and had an opportunity for us to expand our value proposition into the capital market space, right? With the sort of the multi-pronged approach of a capital markets offering around sales and trading, research, and then investment banking. And so, our acquisition of AltaCorp Capital back in March 31st of 2020, when we bought all the equity, was an important investment to integrate into this multi-pronged offer. And so it was leveraging a really strong corporate banking offer, senior debt balance sheet offering, with the opportunity to look at AltaCorp Capital that had a good stronghold in the energy industry, had some good research, had some solid sales and trading, had some good investment bankers. And then how do we put the two together, which basically was a 1 + 1 = 4 opportunity for us and hypothesis when we made that investment. We knew the limitations of the value proposition at the time. And so we, over the last 4 years, have been really leaning into not only the value proposition of people by acquiring what would be some of the top investment bankers in the country are related to energy, which we've done, but expanding the products and services, including fixed income trading for liquidity purposes, putting carbon on the desk, which is, I think, an important product for the future, some carbon trading there, and then just growing the breadth and the research that we have around the energy industry itself, which again is all fundamentally anchored in great people. So that for us has been the journey and an important journey. And I think, we can be really satisfied with where we're at in demonstrating that value proposition to energy companies in the province.
The boutique banking market in Canada is basically drying up. There's not many small banks left. Maybe Acumen in Calgary, First Energy's gone. There's not many small banks in Canada. Why is that?
Well, we saw that. I think that was one of the reasons why we were attracted to purchasing AltaCorp Capital in the beginning. And again, I'm biased to this business model. There are great competitors that are boutique investment banks in the province, and they're really good at what they do. Having said that, there's fewer of them. I think, again, our belief is that the integrated model is a more effective model. And so, again, when you can have corporate bankers sitting down with and beside the capital markets investment bankers that have the research, that have the sales and trading, and you bring the financial markets group, you bring your wealth management group, you bring an integrated offer to the client that is a one-stop shop for them, for their strategies. We think that's the offer into the future. And so, I think that's why, we've grown as we've grown, because that business, that integrated offer, certainly the hypothesis of the 1 + 1 = 4 has certainly played out. And to your point, it would be, if not the fastest growing part of our organization, one of the fastest growing. And again, I hear it time and time again from our clients that they're valuing our commitment to the energy industry. And we have an annual fall investors conference in New York that's focused on energy, this year on life sciences as well as a second part of it. But, I talk to a dozen clients in the industry that would say the integrated offering that you're bringing to bear is very competitive in the market. And they're good at giving us feedback too of what we need to do to improve into the future. But we're very happy thus far with the last 3 or 4 years and the evolution of that offer in the market.
On the other hand, sometimes the best way for bigger companies to grow is through the acquisition of the small guys. Does it worry you that the organic small entrepreneurial banks aren't coming up as much anymore to help you ultimately at the end of the day?
I think it's a great call out. We recently announced an acquisition of BCV Asset Management in Winnipeg. This is in our efforts to scale our wealth management offer across the country. And they're an organization that has between $5.5 and $6 billion in assets under administration, would be relatively small. The big national banks wouldn't look at them, but it's a sweet spot for us to look at how we can acquire them. I think there's a plethora of those that are out there. And I think there are still opportunities in the boutique investment banking space that would be logical for us to consider. Our growth is predominantly organic, augmented and complemented by inorganic growth strategies. And so, we're constantly looking at what those opportunities are in the marketplace. And I think, again, that fundamentally is enabled through the strong balance sheet that we have. If banks run barely above regulatory capital levels, you do not have an opportunity to grow and expand your balance sheet. You don't have an opportunity to inorganically acquire organizations that plug into the value propositions that you want and your clients are demanding. And we are in, I think, a bit of an enviable spot that we've got good capacity in our balance sheet to acquire, like BCV Asset Management. Just to put the data point out there, we have grown our commitments in the last 4 years by in excess of $4 billion in energy alone in the province. We have 28% of every non-consumer loan in ATB Financial is in the energy industry somewhere, upstream, midstream, downstream, project finance, power. 17%, that equates to about 17% of the outstanding balances of loans are in energy. The next biggest bank, just to put it in perspective, is 5%. The average of the big five is between 1.5% and 2% and declining. And we're 17% and growing. So, again, it's when we talked about sort of the target client, the risk profile, like there's no doubt that we're putting our money literally where our mouth is in how we commit to the industry. And again, it's both on balance sheet and equally as important, it's off balance sheet around the advisory services that we offer to these clients, as I've described. So we're incredibly excited. We're incredibly proud. I mean, to some respect, it's relatively easy to lend into an industry with such strong management, such a strong track record of adapting to competitive pressures, economic pressures, regulatory pressures. Like the resiliency of the energy industry in Alberta is second to none. And so it would be almost malpractice for us not to be engaged in an industry that is so prominent, so powerful, and so well run overall.
The industry is seeing consolidation into a handful of larger energy names now that are profitable. So how does that help ATB at the end of the day? Do you see the consolidation cycle as a source of opportunity for the bank, or how do you think about that?
Yeah, and we would, in the context of advice, I think that's a great example as industries, and not just the energy industry, but as many industries expand and contract the number of players based on, a variety of factors, ATB can be there with advice. And we've seen it in the E&P space, in the exploration space, and we've seen it in the oilfield services space, where we have acted as advisors on many different transactions that, again, ebb and flow with the economics and the regulatory burdens and the growth profiles of the subsets within the industry itself. We can be there with advice, and we've proven that. So, I think especially since the collapse of the energy price back in 2014 with the pandemic and, the material drop in the valuation of some of these companies and now the regrowth over the past 4 years, it's been quite remarkable. And again, it speaks to the adaptability of the leaders in this space, and ATB Financial is there as organizations look at different methods of growing or contracting or selling or exiting. We can be there with a piece of advice.
Speaking of being there for the sector, some of the best opportunities occur in the worst times. For example, in 2020, when oil went negative, with the specialized knowledge in energy, you understand that. Have you noticed that it helps you to step up in the times when energy producers need it at their worst moments, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Oddly enough, I think fondly of those times early on in the pandemic about ATB Financial, our board and our management team and our entire company. We right away struck 3 goals early on in the pandemic. 1 was support our team members. 2 was support our clients. 3 was to stay viable, right? You can imagine the scenario analysis we did with the collapse in many things, including the energy price and many other industries. When we stress tested our balance sheet, there were some scary moments there for us and other banks. And thankfully, we were able to maneuver and lead our way through that. But I look upon it fondly, to your point, when oil went negative, there was opportunity to be steadfast in our commitment of an industry that we had been steadfastly committed to for several decades before. And were there some phone calls to all sorts of leaders of organizations, big, medium, and small, by myself and the team in the energy industry? Absolutely. And were we confident in the plans and the strategies that meaningfully had them proactively managing the companies like they needed to? Absolutely. And so again, once again, spoke to the testament of the resiliency, the adaptability, and the strength of management in this industry to withstand that challenge. And I have no doubt that as the energy stack globally begins to evolve and continues to evolve, that the Canadian energy industry and specifically Alberta will remain prominent and well positioned to provide reliable, affordable, and well-run energy to the world. I've no doubt that will continue.
The ATB board has some great members on it, one of which being Jim Davidson, who did the podcast, who has been there and done that, seen a lot of things. But how do you attract high-quality board members to the company? What makes them want to join ATB?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a bit humbling and a bit of an honor to be on the same podcast as Jim. I spent some time last night listening to the podcast that you did with Jim, and he, as usual, just does a great job representing the industry, representing energy, financial services, and obviously ATB Financial.
How do you get people like that?
Yeah, well, we say a couple things very proudly. One is I fundamentally believe it takes a great regulatory body to help enable a great industry. I think it takes a great board to help enable an organization to be as successful as ATB Financial has been. And we punch way above our weight with the board members. I think we attract them for a variety of reasons. One is there's absolute pride in every single one of our board members to the institution that ATB Financial represents in the province. So there's some pride in having your name associated with ATB Financial. That's number one. And each one of them, to their core, believes in the province of Alberta and believes in ATB Financial as a conduit for great things in Alberta, whether it's a catalyst for growth economically, whether it's improving the quality of life, whether it's being a prominent player in energy, agriculture, commercial real estate, technology, growth, innovation, whatever it is. You can't rip that out of any of the board members. They are just so fundamentally anchored on that. And then we have a really strong board chair. Like Joan Hertz is, talk about gold standard in governance. She herself will attract board members that want to be part of a board that is exceptionally well governed and transparent and holds management to such high standards of, again, being and competing on a level playing field and self-regulating to a standard of comparable other banks. And so we have a very, very strong board composition and a very strong board chair. And then finally, we have an exceptional relationship with our owner. And I cannot speak more highly of Minister Horner and Deputy Minister Kate White. These are individuals that fundamentally understand
Premier Smith.
And Premier Smith. Absolutely. And we had Premier Smith at our energy investors conference in September, and she did a remarkable job, not only speaking to the energy industry, but speaking about the future of what energy can be in Alberta and Canada and beyond. So all three of them are very big advocates, we believe, of ATB Financial and understand who we are and what we can do now and into the future, and hold us to high accord. High accord on transparency and governance, high accord to financial results, high accord to, the communities and supporting the communities that we serve, those four stakeholder groups. They understand the value of ATB Financial, and through our discussions with them would help enable us to be more independent and grow like we need to grow. And again, in reciprocal fashion, we are pretty transparent with them, and they have a clear understanding of what our strategy is, who we support. And I think it's, right now we're in a pretty good, solid position with our owner.
As the CEO of ATB, your job isn't literally to make the loans, or it isn't to do the day-to-day things. It's to make decisions. But what decisions do you focus on the most? Is it capital allocation at a high level? What's the highest signal for you as the leader of the company?
I manage my time and the decisions I make around systems So internally, so I make sure that our human resource system, complete with talent management, career development, attraction, retention, compensation. So how is our human resource system evolving and adapting to the changing times? How is our financial system complete with profitability, risk mitigation, diversification of revenue, scenario planning into the future? How is our financial system enabling and connecting to ultimately our strategy? And incredibly important to make sure that the human resource system, the finance system, our risk system, our technology systems in the organization are all interconnected in a way that enable us to deliver against the strategies that we're trying to deploy. So that for me is where I spend my time. And I do that through my direct report, or our SLT. We refer to them as the strategic leadership team of the company. And knock on wood, I am blessed with an extremely talented, high functioning, adaptable, passionate team that every day wakes up to deliver against our purpose of we exist to make it possible and the strategies that we're deploying. And so that's where I spend my time internally. And then I spend a lot of my time externally. I'm passionately a board member and a co-chair of STARS Air Ambulance, which I'm pretty passionate about. I'm on the Visa Canada Advisory Board. I'm on the Canadian Chamber of Commerce Western Council Advisory Council, and I'm part of the Business Council of Alberta. I'm an advisor on advancing women executives in Western Canada. I'm a board member of Access Connects. When they combine Board Ready Women and Access together, I was asked to be on that board. And so I'm very passionate about advancing women executives in multiple industries. I'm passionate about mental health and supporting. We've got a very big focus of mental health and reducing stigma and advancing, again, mental health with physical health and wellness in the organization. And I take that outside the company as well. So I spend time using my platform as the CEO of ATB Financial to advance and help promote other causes that I think are really important to Alberta.
From the perspective of ATB, what's your thoughts on the proposed emissions cap federally in Canada, and why is it a bad idea?
Mm-hmm. Federal and provincial policy, I think, play an important role in any industry. And I think the emissions cap that the federal government is proposing and tabling is just bad policy. I think the balance between economic prosperity and responsible development of resources needs to be in balance. And for some reason, the federal government today in Canada doesn't understand that balance and really is, I think, a bit disconnected between what's really happening within the industry in Canada and the responsible development of natural resources in an affordable, secure, accessible way and transparent way. The emissions cap doesn't hit the mark. It will once again damage the opportunity for growth, for international investment, and provide a lack of clarity for decade-long investments that this industry has to make to, again, provide long-term sustainable returns that their shareholders would demand. I'm optimistic and hopeful that it won't move forward. But again, it's just another piece of grit in the gear of the energy system in Alberta that has to respond to what is, I think, a very disconnected federal government right now from what's good for the country.
How does ATB move forward constructively with a policy and leaders that don't seem to listen to the electorate that is not in favor of policies like that? What do you do constructively?
Much like we punch above our weight with a very effective board, we punch above our weight with the influence of where we get involved in sort of the banking ecosystem that will influence federal and provincial policy. So we would work with the energy regulator provincially in sort of the evolution of what the industry and regulation needs to look like over the industry. we would work with, for example, the Sustainable Finance Action Council, which we were members of, are members of. That was a federal group that was put together across the big banks, the insurance companies, and the asset management firms that was looking at crafting a taxonomy for energy and a taxonomy for what the evolution of the energy industry needed to look like. We were very big influencers on that taxonomy, which I think now is getting some traction. And you're hearing Deputy Prime Minister Freeland talk about it. I would unabolishedly say that we influenced gas to be an important transitionary source of energy for the evolution of Canadian energy now and into the future. That was not the opinion of some of our competitor banks and obviously some of the federal politicians in Ottawa. Our team, and specifically Kevin Kynock on our energy team, is exceptionally good at representing the industry from an ATB Financial perspective and influencing some very important decisions that need to be made as we look forward at the taxonomy and how the sort of finance ecosystem will support energy now and into the future. So that's how we play a role. We would participate with the Western Canada Chamber on Hill Days in Ottawa. I would go to those. We would participate when we can with the Business Council of Alberta, who's an exceptional advocate for energy in Alberta and beyond in combating some of the poor policies that are coming out of Ottawa. So we bring our expertise and advice, as I mentioned, as effectively around the boardroom tables of energy organizations to the tables in Ottawa and the tables in Edmonton. We think that's an important responsibility that we have, and we do a very effective job at that. Like I say, we punch way above our weight. Our voice is sought after in many cases around those tables.
That's an hour. Maybe to get towards the end, to end on a lighter note, best deal you've seen so far. Is there an investment that sticks out to you through the years? One that really seems to hit it?
Like for us as a company, an investment? I think, in the context of the investment, AltaCorp Capital would be really good. We bought a small technology company, Grow Technologies, out of Vancouver back in 2020 as well, which was proven to be really good at our e-commerce side, honestly. I'm hoping BCV Asset Management turns out to be as accretive and as valuable to our clients as what AltaCorp Capital has been. But I think, the teams and the leaders in that capital markets business would prove every day that was a great decision, and we're very proud of it.
Up to this point, what's been the most favorite part of your career? Maybe right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think certainly the decision to move from CIBC to ATB Financial back in 2009, I was super nervous about it, and it turned out to be an exceptional decision, which I just am so fond of this company. And I think the decisions that I've made to surround myself with the right people and to invest in people, no doubt about it, have been sort of the signals of pride in my 38 plus years of leading in the financial services industry. And I look forward to many more.
Advice to a 30-year-old Curtis Stange. What would you tell him?
Oh, wow. Be bold, take risks, and invest in people and invest in yourself. I think that's, I had some sage advice when I was young in my career. I invested in myself an awful lot. When deregulation happened in the late 80s, I took my Canadian securities course just because it was the right thing to do as banks bought asset management and brokerage firms. Got my MBA, went to Stanford in 2014 for some exec education. So investing in yourself, being humble, being vulnerable, being curious, but being bold at the same time. There's a nice fine balance there. Mm-hmm. But my 30-year-old self, be bold, be curious, be passionate, invest in yourself and invest in people, and you'll do okay.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for doing this. And also thank you again via ATB Capital Markets for sponsoring the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure, Trevor. It's been a really enjoyable hour. Thanks very much.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but...
No, thank you. And again, thanks to the team in ATB Capital Markets and our energy team. and especially Ruben. Shout out for connecting us and having a relationship with you. We wouldn't be here without him. So thanks very much.
Hello, listeners out there. Thanks for checking out the podcast. Hopefully the episode provided some insights. If you enjoyed the show, check out trose.ca where more episodes are yet to come. You can also subscribe to the podcast where your token of support is much appreciated. Until next time, happy coffee drinking.